maybe he's going with a little one for people.
Pursuant to the New Jersey Open Public Meetings Act and JSA 10:4-10, adequate notice of this meeting has been provided by advertising such notice in the Local News Tribune, the Asbury Press, the Board Office, schools, and on Cablevision Channel 118 and Verizon Buyers Channel 24, and by filing such notice with the Township Clerk. This meeting was scheduled for Tuesday, March 12, 2019. The Board will take formal action on payment of bills and other agenda items. Mr. Mayor?
The Old Bridge Township Board of Education acknowledges that the law of this state establishes that members of the public, including members of the board, have the right to record public board meetings using audio or video recording devices, provided that that act of recording does not interfere with the business of this public board meeting. Therefore, the board makes it known that any such recording is to be considered a private recording of the individual and in no manner represents the official record of this board. The board therefore takes no responsibility for such private recording and completely disavows any future use.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Carroll.
Here.
Freeman.
Here.
Dunn. Ellis Foster.
Here.
Lynn.
Here.
Reed.
Here.
Singh. Solikowski.
Here.
Kelly.
Here.
Don Hughes.
Can you rise for the pledge, please?
Flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Advantages to that.
Unfortunately, next meeting we will have.
Absolutely.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I need a volunteer next week to read the Code of Ethics corner. Jill Carroll, thank you. We have our district goals and our board goals. I need a motion to approve the addendum to the agenda. You'll have it in your packet. It's an addendum under certificated personnel.
I'll second.
Okay, Alice Foster.
Carroll. Freeman.
Yes.
Ellis Foster.
Yes.
Lynn.
Yes.
Reed.
Yes.
Solikowski.
Yes.
Kelly.
Yes.
Motion to add the addendum.
Then we'll have the approval of the minutes and a report of our student representative. And I see we have some recognition.
Yes, we do. These are many grants from the Ed Foundation.
And the superintendent's report.
So we'll have a superintendent's report next week, but also tonight there'll be some just informational items on the curriculum, on the finance, and then just a little update on the latest round of state aid cuts. So first, I'm going to ask Mr. Mara to turn it over in reference to our budget findings.
Yeah, the auditing firm that does the audit for the district is Single Fund and Co. Two representatives are here from that organization, Andrew Zabego, the manager, and Mike Pinnell, the manager, also the manager on our CAPRA and on our audit. So I'll turn it over to them to do the presentation of the CAPRA for the year ending June 30, 2018.
Good evening, everyone. Before I begin, I'd like to thank Joe and his staff for their cooperation for a time here during the audit. We're usually here anywhere between 4 to 6 weeks, and we've always been treated with professional courtesy. So thank you again, Joe. We're here 2 months later than usual. We're usually here in January presenting the audit. This year, we were required by the state to incorporate a new accounting standard, that's B75, accounting for other post-employment benefits. However, the necessary information never made available to us by the state until January 31st, and the deadline had to be extended from December 5th to February 28th. The new deadline was met, and copies of the audit were filed with all federal, state, and county agencies. I'm going to start with a brief synopsis of the district's financial position, and then I'll turn it over to Andy to discuss the management report and the implementation of the ASB 75 and the impact on the district. The scope of our audit covered the period of July 1st, 2017 through June 30th of 2018. Our audit is in conformity with regulations set by the State of New Jersey Board of Education. The audit is comprised of 2 reports. There's the FICA report, is the annual comprehensive annual financial report, or CAFR for short, and then there's the management report. The CAFR report contains all the financial exhibits and the notes to the financial statements. And the smaller report, the management report, contains any audit findings, recommendations, as well as supplemental exhibits. This is a unique report because you can find 3 different fund balances based on different accounting practices. However, for tonight's presentation, I'll be using the fund balance found on Exhibit C-1 on page 91, the budgetary comparison schedule. This balance is used for all budgeting purposes. So those are the figures you use when you have to submit your budget to the state of New Jersey. And this is the true fund balance of the district. So during the year, the district began with $21,007,039.94 in fund balance. And during the school year, it incurred a decrease in fund balance of $624,852.51. As a result, it ended the school year with $20,382,187.43 in fund balance. I'll just run through a detail of what makes up the school district fund balance. So the first component is $5,222,850, and this amount was assigned and has been designated to support the 18-19 budget. $2,472,610.54 has been designated as excess surplus, and this amount must be used to support the 19-20 budget. This amount is above and beyond what you're legally allowed to keep as a reserve. Later on, Andy will go over that calculation in the management report. The next 3 reserve balances were all established by board resolutions and are for specific purposes. The first is your capital reserve balance of $4,908,106.89. And these are reserved for capital projects that have been approved in your long-range facilities plan. The next reserve is the emergency reserve, which is $1,830.25. The purpose of this fund is for anything unforeseen that might come up during the course of the year. But this amount can only be used for any expenditures that require a thorough and efficient education. Your next fund balance is your maintenance reserve, and that available balance is $3,616,179.09. And this fund balance you're allowed to use on expenditures that are required for the maintenance of your school facilities. And then there's $108,256.69, which was committed to your year-end encumbrances. And finally, unassigned and the maximum amount allowed by state statute that the school board can keep as a reserve balance, also known as your 2% reserve, is $4,750,000. 052, 353, 97. Those are your components of your fund balance. And in summary, despite a slight decrease in your fund balance, the district continues to maintain comparable fund balances from previous years. I'd like to now turn it over to Ann to discuss the other parts of the report.
Good evening. Just like to expand on what Mike had indicated about this capital report having three different fund balance numbers in there. Because of reporting conditions, requires three different fund balances. The fund balance in section A is based on what they call the net position fund balance. That's your worst case scenario where we have to book every liability, compensated balances, outstanding debt, any unfunded liabilities as relates to pension. So if you look at that schedule on A1, that shows that you have a deficit fund balance of $60 million. Then you go to the B section, that's a fund balance on GAAP basis. The only difference with that is because the state aid deferred to their payments, state aid payments to the school districts, they don't pick it up as liability, so we can't pick it up as a revenue to the school boards. So we back out the final two state aid payments, and on exhibit B1, your fund balance is down to a deficit of $379,000. And like when Mike went over the fund balance in the C section, that is your true fund balance, all those components. But trying to explain to the public and to even the school board members why you have three different fund balances, it just makes no sense whatsoever. But the State Department of Education and all the rating agencies, Moody's and Standard & Poor's, they want to know what it is for their purposes. If you, on the skinny report, is like Mike had indicated, is the management report. Before I get into this, when we perform the audit, every year the State Department of Education comes out with an audit program that we have to adhere to. It tells us what to look for, what new changes that the State Department of Education implemented. It tells us what to look for when we do our grant testing, so we follow that. In addition to using the State Department of Education audit program, we have our own accounting software that we also develop additional auditing programs. We use a accounting software called PPC, and we use that to do our cash testing, our payroll testing, our expenditure testing. It's above the State Department of Education audit program. We actually, do more auditing testing than we should. In the little skinny report, if you look at the table of contents, these are some of the items that we look for during the course of the audit. We look at expenditures, we do voucher audits. We look at payroll testing, we select a number of random employees and we trace them to their contract to see if they're getting paid according to their contract. Not only above, but below the contract to see if, they're being paid according to it.
We'll also look at the top 5 salary employees. So we'll look at the superintendent, the business administrator. We'll also look at the payroll clerk, and other people in her office as well.
That's good. Basically, whoever has access to the payroll software, we look at. We look at their W-2, we look at their personnel file to see if they're getting paid correctly. And we never came across anything inappropriate. We look at the board secretary's records. We look at the treasurer's records. We look at this food service fund, the student activity funds. We look at the application of state schools that they have to submit every year. So with that said, throughout the little skinny report, I'm pleased to announce that we have no audit findings or recommendations. It only becomes a finding and recommendation if it's a breakdown of internal control. If it's an isolated difference, like in other words, if we test 100 vouchers and we find one voucher that might not have had a signature, or might have had a photocopy invoice, we consider that isolated. But once again, if we test 100 invoices and we see 30 or 40, then it become a finding because it's a breakdown in your internal control process.
Just Mike, approximately how many payroll verification?
We'll test anywhere between probably 20 to 25 employees, plus another 5.
And you take that from the beginning?
Yes, we'll trace it to contracts, to your payroll register. We'll trace it to pension reports. Then we'll also, when we test the grants, teachers under the grants, Title I, we'll make sure their salaries are being charged to the grants, and then we'll make sure they're being charged, sometimes there's an allocation between the grants and, the normal budget. So we just test for that and make sure they're approved in the minutes that they should be, charged to what specific grants.
In terms of purchasing and the purchase orders, about how many purchase orders do you look at?
We'll do probably about 60 random, and then we'll do there's a ISI threshold, the materiality level, and then anything over that materiality level, we'll look at almost every voucher. So we won't look at repetitive ones.
So you look at every purchase order, you make sure that there are quotes in place.
Yes, anything.
What about when we do bids? You also look at all the documentations.
Yes, we'll go
Bids.
through your purchasing department, we'll look at all the bid specs to make sure, they were advertised, everything was followed accordingly.
And Joe, just to expand on that, we use a random generator that when we come in, we ask you what your first check number was that you issued during the school year, and your last check number, and then we get a population, we run a generator, say, give us 60 numbers, give us 70 numbers. So it's very random, we don't look for anything particular, whatever the computer tells us to test, we then ask for those check numbers. And then Mike had indicated we follow it through. If the particular check we pulled is a bid, then we request bid documents. Make sure it was advertised in the minutes, make sure it was approved by the board members here. If there's any change orders, we follow that through. If it exceeds 20%, we make sure it was advertised in accordance with the public contract law. Same thing with the employees. Like Mike had indicated, we do a top 5 highest paid salaries. We also automatically test anybody who has access to the payroll software. And then the remaining employees, we assign a number to it. Once again, we ask the random generator to give us 25 numbers. And based on those numbers, whichever name was associated with it, that's what we test. So we don't come in and just look for one particular purchase order. We do random. Because once you start looking, you can't audit like that. You have to just be random.
I imagine if you view numerous errors, mistakes, that you do expand the order.
Yes.
Go beyond that.
See, once again, with our scenario, if we tested 70 purchase orders, we find one, we don't expand it. If out of that 70, if we find 7 or more, 10% is usually our threshold to expand our testing. Anything, if we randomly pick 70, we find 7 that have exceptions, we'll do another 25 until we get a comfort that they are isolated differences. And if not, then we bring it to your attention as to what's going on. Or please explain why there's errors in our sample.
What's just a very random ballpark, dollar amount of purchase orders we do in a year?
On page 14 in the management report, it says that you had $144 million in expenditures. So purchase orders wise, 1,000 maybe? Or Joe would know better. Yeah, I don't want to throw a number out without being.
And what about there's a lot of people don't understand too, even like high school, student activities. How much money flows through there approximately a year? You go shock most people. Yeah, high school.
Your high school had receipts of $1,836,000 and change running through their accounts during the
That's just
school
student
year.
activities.
That's just student activity.
And how long have you been doing these audits for the district?
For Oak Ridge itself, At least 15+ years.
When's the last time you had a finding, a recommendation?
Probably maybe 5, 6 years ago, I think.
7 years.
7 years ago.
The athletic account, please.
Thank you.
So I just want to bring your attention back to the management report. There is a calculation in here for excess surplus. And it's a form that's prescribed by the Department of Education. There's no deviations. The numbers are mentioned into here, and whatever your excess surplus, if you had any, is automatically calculated. There are 3 exceptions to the 2% levy as far as what we're concerned. If you receive extraordinary aid, that's an adjustment. And if you received any additional non-public transportation aid, that's an addition also. So if you look at page 14 in the management report, we first start, we go and we enter what the total expenditures were for the school district. Just the general fund, no student activity funds, no special revenue funds, which are your grants, no capital projects, just strictly your main general fund budget. You work through the calculations, and on row number M there, it tells us what your maximum fund balance can be at the end of June 30th. And it was $4,052,000. Then you back out the components. You have, by Department of Education law, you're able to set up several different reserves. The most common ones are capital reserve, an emergency reserve, and a maintenance reserve, which Old Bridge has established. All of these reserves are approved and set up by board members. You have control of it to set it up and also to withdraw money from those funds. Once that's all backed out, the calculation tells us on page 15 that you have an excess surplus of $2,472,000. You can utilize that excess surplus. That has to be utilized in subsequent budgets, given back to support that year's budget. So for example, this excess surplus of $2,472,000, you would have to utilize on your 2019, 2020 budget to give it back to support the budget. So with that said, other than the 3 reserves that you have established, any excess money, you can't do anything with. It has to go back to support your budget, basically your tax levy in the subsequent year budgets.
Andy, can I just expand on that? So if there was a year where we received $4 million more than we actually spent, that money can't be put aside into any type of savings accounts for future budgets. It has to either go into one of the reserve accounts or it has to go back to the local taxpayer.
That's
There's
correct.
no ability to put that money aside anywhere. It has to go back to the taxpayer, and it effectively would reduce the local tax levy in a subsequent year.
Correct. And then with this calculation in the management report on pages 14, 15, and 16, this becomes the basis for your C1 that Mike went over on how the recapitulation of the fund balances occurred. Just want to also expand on what Mike had said as far as the deferment of the audit. I'm not going to say delay, because we weren't the ones that were delaying it. It was the state of New Jersey. Like Mike had indicated, the normal due date is always December 5th. Because they didn't have their information in place, that deferment was February 28th. And we met it. It was actually filed, way before that, once the information became available. About 3 years ago, the state instituted and followed GASB number 68. That was your unfunded pension liability. We all read in the paper how the PERS, PFRNS for the municipalities and the TPAF are underfunded. So the state is trying to assign that unfunded liability to every entity, whether it's a school district, a municipality, authority, or a fire commission. So on the last report that we got from the state of New Jersey, overage's unfunded pension liability for the TPAF is approximately $419 million. The PERS is approximately $41 million unfunded. That's the numbers that they assign to overage.
So the TPAF is the
Teachers' pension annuity fund
versus the non-certified.
Public Employees Retirement System. Like you said, that's the non-certified personnel. Moving forward, we don't know if the state's actually going to bill you for that. At any given time, you know, if the state's looking for money, they might pass on a bill of 10% to the school districts, 1%. But still, on a $450 million unfunded liability, a 1% would be kind of hard to absorb in your budget. GASB 75, they came up with another unfunded liability. As you know, all the retired teachers who worked in the school district are paid by the state. The school district makes no contribution to their retirement. Everything's paid from the state of New Jersey. Once again, that's unfunded. So they wanted to assign a value to every school district. So for the year ended June 30, 2017, the state, through a separate report, assigned a value of $322,995,000 of unfunded liability for what they call other post-employment benefits. Basically, the retiree teachers that are getting paid by the state. Once again, moving forward, if they're going to try and recoup some of their money, that's another liability or another payment that, you know, school districts might have to make in the future. Right now, there's no billing or law that says you have to contribute to us that, but they do something for a reason. So, you know, if they want to assign a number to every school district, every municipality, they might be thinking down the road to how can we get some money to make the state budget less.
And would that be something that would have to be passed by the legislature, or is that a policy?
That's policy. You know,
It doesn't have to, if they decide, they would, listen,
Right.
I can expect anything at this point
Right.
from them, so, so if the state decides they want to do that, it is not a legislative act, it is a policy act. That doesn't need to go before anybody if they decide, yeah, we want to do that.
I believe not. I'm not 100% sure how the state government works.
But let me ask you this question. So, you throw that giant gorilla out there, some sort of, speculation could happen fast. How do you plan for that, with a 2% restriction on how much you can save?
You can't, because we just went over, you can't put money aside for a rainy day except for special reserves. You do have those reserves set up. Once again, all approved by the board controls it. If they do,
Capital, just so that, the money that can be set aside is for capital reserve, which is linked to long-range facility plan projects. The maintenance reserve is linked to the maintenance projects. There is no reserve available for educational costs. There's no reserve for that, so it's just, that's the money that would go back into the unrestricted fund balance, and if it exceeds the 2%, it has to be given back to the taxpayers.
So in these type of situations where you lose, over the next 5 years, 15 million in state aid, there's no way to prepare for it. If there are ways to, these unfunded liabilities, there's no way to save for it.
no, right now, there's no legal way to set up a reserve for it. If they do pass this, that might be another reserve that school districts might be able to put money in every year. But as of today, you don't have that option.
Also, retrospectively, we had no option to put money aside for educational costs.
And once again, like Joe said on the capital reserve, that's a 5-year plan that every 5 years, the board members have to review and make changes to. So the money that's in the capital reserve, anything in that long-range facility plan, that's the only items that can be spent on. Maintenance reserve is tied into maintaining the current state of your school district, your buildings. And the emergency reserve is exactly that, basically items that are needed to provide a thorough and efficient education. And once again, the final saying of the manager report was that there were no reportable findings. There's nothing of material nature that required us to give a recommendation.
Any questions from the public to the auditors?
Did you say you could put money aside in a long-range plan?
No, it's what they call a long-range facility plan. It's a capital plan. Every 5 years has to be approved by the board members up here. The long-range facility plan identifies needs like a roof replacement, windows replacement.
Maybe a new elementary school?
That could be, if it's in the plan, yes.
Is there a maximum amount of money that could be put aside for that in the funds?
Once again, it can't exceed the cost in the long-range facility plan.
But it could have, okay, thank you.
But if we were, did you ask to put aside for a new school?
I'm saying if that was part of a long-range
Yeah,
plan, was that,
what would happen is if we, right now, there is no money set aside for a new school. However, if we decided to build a new school, we would modify the long-range facility plan to do a new school. So you're able to modify it, but it's always, the point is, you can only use the money that's in capital reserve to fund those capital projects.
right, I guess I was saying like years ago when we had like an overfunding, that's what my train of thought was.
We have never had an overfunding.
Oh, no? Oh, okay, I must have misunderstood. Thank you.
Is there a question over here?
Yeah, the $2.4 million doesn't fall into any of the other categories. You said that it has to be applied to the next budget, and then it was also said that it goes back to the taxpayers. Can you clarify by that you're saying that since it's being applied to the next budget, that would be $2.4 million that wouldn't need to be raised in taxes?
The clarification is, the excess surplus would be applied towards the next upcoming budget. When the audit's completed, the school district is already in their 18-19 budget, so it can't be applied to that budget. They're starting to work on their 19-20 budget, so automatically they have to use that. The state's gonna make them use that $2.5 million as a, what we call fund balance participant.
Just to clarify, what it is, it's a revenue item. It's a line item on the revenue side of the budget. So it's just like the local tax levy. It's a revenue item on the revenue side of the budget.
So in layman's terms, there was $2.4 million that wasn't spent last year. They can't spend it this year, but they have to spend it next year.
Well, it's not spent, it's above and beyond the calculation. So those excess funds must be anticipated as revenue in the 19-20 budget.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Board members?
Yeah,
Mr.
Kelly,
Horton wanted
just-
to address Kelly's question.
Just before we move on from the audit report, clarifying the answer to your question, it's a two-part answer, both are bad news, needless to say. On the pension liabilities, that could be collected or partially levied against the public entities such as you through pretty minimal administrative action out of the governor's office. But to allow you to create a surplus account or any way to save to pay against that would require the elaborate process of changing statutes. So they could bill you for it, but they would have to go to great lengths to give you a way to pay that bill.
We have no timetable on that.
No timetable. It is a threat that's been hanging out for a couple of years since the middle of the Christie administration. It's really been one note, and it continues to be hanging over every public agency's head now.
The certificate on the board member, it's been really since 2011, since those changes to the pension were incurred by the board, enacted by the state. So it can happen next year, it can happen in 5 years, never happen, nobody knows.
And that's what happened with the PERS too. 12 years ago, there were no pension payments also for the PERS, for the non-certificated staff. Then they phased it in over a 5-year period, and now we're paying almost $2 million a year in pension contribution for the non-certificated. That actually is coming out of the district's budget.
In the early 80s and 90s, the pension funds were so well that the state actually took money out of it to balance their state budgets. And like Joe had said, there was maybe 5 or 6 years where there were no billings for PERS. In other words, the school boards, municipalities, fire districts made no payments or contributions to the PERS system. Fast forward, now you have a liability of approximately $450 million assigned to you.
We're in a crisis as it is. How could we even possibly be expected to?
That crisis isn't here yet, so it's a crisis for it. There's no way, look, what Chris said is there's an easy way for them to implement this, it has to cost on us, but there's no way for us to deal with it. No mechanism in place, as I've said, with 2% tax levy and cap that we have. What would we do with this one?
But it's also just a prospective liability. It's a threat that's never been made good on as far as TPAC goes, as far as you go.
As of now, they're not making us book anything against your fund balance as a reportable item, basically. In other words, listen, this number's out there, but don't do anything with it, but I just want to let you aware that it's out there. So until they start making you pay or setting up a liability, that's when it starts hitting your surplus. But right now, each year, we just report on it. You know, for 2000, the year before, it was much higher, your unfunded liability. It was higher by approximately $70 million. But fast forward the next year, the market did better. When they predict these unfunded liabilities, they're basing it based on a rate of return of interest of 4%. Well, if they had a 7% return on investment, the liability goes down. Once again, if they established a $450 million unfunded liability based on 4%, but the actual return is 2%, well, next year that 450 could be 525. So it's a moving target, the unfunded liability.
Okay, no other questions? Thank you, Andy and Mike, I appreciate your.
Thank you.
Yes. Just waiting for Andy and Mike. I do have Furman bringing about 7 chairs over, but if you guys want to take any of those chairs. We have a presentation, so we might be here a little bit. You want to go there, since we're on numbers now?
So Mr. Cittadino asked me just to bring a couple of to share with you some of the numbers that were given to us by the state last Thursday at 3:30. I recognize many of the faces in the audience that you've heard some of the presentations that we've done. So I'm just going to give you a comparison as to what was advised to us on Thursday. First, I think you should recall that I said that, well, even to begin with, our state aid for 2019-20 is reduced by $3,017,871. Now, what I was talking about in my presentation, the number of presentations that my estimate at that point, and it was on the basis of all the people that I talked to and the professional associations, is that it would be $2.6 million reduction. It actually turned out to be above a $3 million reduction in state aid, so it was worse than what we expected. Secondly, again, those of you who haven't heard me, last year, the state's position was that the local taxpayer in Old Bridge should be paying $112 million in terms of its tax levy, and we were only paying $100 million. Well, under the new calculation for 1920, the state feels that the local taxpayer should be paying $119 million. They increased that number by $7 million, and that's part of the basis for the increase in the decrease in the state aid. And the last number that I'll share with you is, again, what I advised the public before on the basis of the information from last year is that we were receiving $45 million in state aid. The state calculated that we should only be receiving $33 million, and now the state feels that they should only be paying us $29 million. So as time passes, this is getting worse, and the financial crisis is expanding in terms of the state aid numbers over the next 4 or 5 years. Just to continue, we have met with legislatures, and again on Thursday, we will be meeting with Senator Sweeney and the Representative Dancer and
Senator Thompson.
Senator Thompson to discuss this situation. And no one can really explain to us these major swings in these calculations, that we have to live with what the money is that we will be receiving. So that's where we are today. We took another hit this year, and it's worse than it was last year. Thank you.
Just the one thing I wanted to add to that, so if the state's basing it on low enrollment, from the October 15th to the October 15th report, we're down approximately 100 students. Looking at a $3 million increase from 12 million to 15 million, you're looking at state aid cut of $30,000 per student, if it's just isolated on state aid alone. So they're saying majority of that comes to the increasing value of homes and properties in Old Bridge, and the increasing wealth or income of the residents of Old Bridge. Again, the hard part about that is, if that's their measure in which they're saying we're not paying our fair share, there's a 2% tax, a 2% tax levy, so you can never get to what they're saying is the increased value of homes or increased value of the wealth of the people of the community, whether that be fictitious or not. We don't have a measure in place to tap into that. We're at 2%, whether times are good or times are bad. So that's just another frustrating piece of it. In reference to that, some of the things I wanted Dr. Escone just to update the board on some of the adjustments we have to make going into the summer of this year. Old Bridge has always offered summer school. At the high school level, students pay for it. They go through what used to be the county, then was Ed Services of New Jersey now oversees it and operates it out of our grade 9 center. They employ a lot of our teachers here, but it's not open to just Old Bridge students. Students come from Woodbridge, Sayreville, they come here. For Old Bridge students, we've offered at the middle school level, students in the demonstrating mastery, a free summer school program, and which the town has put the bill. We're still going to continue to do that, but we have to modify it so that we can still meet the needs of our students and do it in a way in which we can fiscally afford it. So Dr. is going to update us on that.
Thank you, Mr. Dean. Thank you, board members. This would typically be an item that would be shared at the board curriculum committee meeting. Our meeting last month was canceled due to weather, which is why I'm presenting it to you tonight at the agenda meeting. The reason is because between tonight, which you've had an opportunity to review the information, if the board is supportive of the proposal, we would be looking to put a motion subsequent onto the agenda for next week on this added to this draft agenda, so then we could subsequently post for the positions on the 20th and approve the requested staff at the April board meeting in time to get prepared. So in the past, we've spent approximately $45,000 annually and that's essentially been just in salaries, to run the middle school summer school program. As you can see, that employed 8 teachers and 1 coordinator for a total cost of $33,000, $937.08. That is just for the remedial program. We did also offer an elective or voluntary program called the Rising 6th and 9th grade program, which was for students who were identified as not requiring it, but perhaps be beneficial if they had that. That was an additional $12,000. The recommendation is that the Rising 6th and 9th grade program would not be offered. We would offer only the remedial program to those students who had failed 1 or more courses over the course of the year. And the way we'd be recommending doing this would be utilizing a similar approach as we've used on the high school level with our credit recovery program, which is utilizing Apex Learning, which is an online learning platform. Recognizing that middle school students, and particularly students who are in need of remediation, would and certainly will benefit from having some face-to-face contact with teachers. We are accounting for that. So basically what we would do is we would have 1 teacher per subject area. Their primary responsibility would be to essentially monitor and facilitate the experience online. They would be monitoring student accounts, checking to see that students were up to speed, how they were performing on assignments, identifying students that might need some additional assistance, and also be available to students if the students need to communicate with them digitally through email and messaging. Those teachers would be on site for 4 hours a week to basically for office hours, which would be a time when they could either recommend for students to come in and work with them on assignments to get them up to speed, provide additional tutoring, or for students to request time for them to come in as well. We would also retain a coordinator. The coordinator would work less hours than they have in the past. There would be 40 hours for the coordinator. And the reason for that, as opposed to the 20 hours for the teacher, is there would be administrative setup responsibilities at the beginning of the summer school. There would be quality control and kind of completion requirements at the end of the summer school to determine who's passed, who's completed the courses, and there may very well be kind of parent or student issues that arise over the course of the 5 weeks that the coordinator would deal with. So the cost per Apex course is a reasonable $25 per course for a 10-week course, and we're estimating 100 courses. The cost for salaries for 1 teacher per subject area for a total of 20 hours for each teacher, and the coordinator would be a total salary cost of $9,628, realizing the savings of $24,309 for the remedial program, $12,000 for the Rising, for a total savings of $36,309. And we feel that this, we're able to continue to provide the service for free to our parents and students, and are optimistic that we're able to offer quality service to the students. That being said, every program is subject to evaluation, and if after a year we find that there are things that need to be adjusted, we need to increase the number of teacher hours, what have you, certainly it's not set in stone, we can do that. But this is the proposal that you have before you for the middle school summer school.
The only caveat I would add is that if parents feel as though their child would benefit more from more hands-on than we're offering, they're free to go to another district that's offering a summer school. Monmouth County offers one, Middlesex County offers one, but again, they would have to pay. If they go out. The best thing we can do is pass your classes now.
Is there how do we verify that the student has access to a computer, and what if they don't, what's their accommodation?
Yeah, I mean, I think, that would be something in the intake process, good point, something in the intake process, to determine whether they had reliable access. It's web-based software, so it can be accessed from the public library, any location that has a terminal. Apex also, though it's not ideal, obviously having a full-size screen is all compatible with iPhone, Droid, so it could actually be done on a handheld device. But I think that's a good point. I'll make note of it in terms of the intake to ask if there's computer access. If there's not, then we certainly could offer up You know,
I spoke to, just to
Good.
touch on that
Yeah.
situation, I spoke to representatives at Ed Services in New Jersey and let them know because our facilities are using for GNC, students could use that lab there.
That's right. Any other questions? Any questions? I know it's
Dr. Casco.
a shift. Yes, sir.
I admire your attempt to save money, but we could save another $9,628. It's not going to work. That's not. I've taught summer school. I've been teaching 21 years. Our students that go to summer school are not going there necessarily because they need a lot more extra. If there's not a teacher doing this work with them, it's not going to get done. They're not independent workers. I mean, the summer school teachers are working every second with them. This is not touting a teacher. I'm just telling you I'm seriously, rather than doing this, save the $9,000 and don't do it, I would recommend having parents pay for it, and they're still getting a bargain. We've had kids opt out of summer school and pay for private tutoring. It's more expensive to go to Huntington School or any of those, and quite often what's happening there is they're just having the work done and they come in September saying, look, we did a packet, and they didn't learn a thing. Really, I mean, I know those kids, and I have some of those kids I had for summer school last year that I have them in class now. I got them specifically put in my class because I had them in summer school, and they need more than just this. And I've seen this in Florida too, by the way. A lot of people that do this online stuff, it's not worth the $10,000. I understand we got to save money, but save the other $9,600. I'm not trying to be rude, but it's just truly my feeling. It's not about the money even here. It's about what the kids need, what's really going to work.
I'm surprised you're saying we accept the Huntington, because I've never accepted them.
You'd be surprised a lot of the stuff we accept. You'd be
Okay.
amazed. I'll tell you later.
I have parents every summer asking me, can they go to Huntington? I deny them.
I
accept it. Monmouth County Ed Services and Middlesex County Ed Services.
It worries me sometimes. I don't want to say anything.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, and certainly, having been in the profession for 25 years, as I have, and worked with, specialized populations, I certainly don't disagree conceptually with what Mr. Lenegro was saying. And I certainly do not believe that a computer takes the place of a teacher. I think when presented with the stark financial realities that preceded this presentation, I think that we need to be looking at creative ways. Now, as I said, this is why we're building in the office hours. If it's deemed inadequate, then we can evaluate and adjust that program moving forward. But I think that unfortunately, we have to look beyond, in some cases, the ideal because of the financial realities, and try and get as close to the ideal as possible working within those financial realities. And that's essentially what we're trying to do with this. But I've always been a student-first administrator. I will be monitoring the program closely. And if in fact we feel that we need more teacher contact time, that's something that we can build into the success of the year. The other piece, I think, which is worth noting, is that this program was begun at a time when we had much fewer academic support services in place in our middle schools in particular. This program, its inception predated any of our response to intervention programs at the high school. It predated a lot of what we're doing with our Title I after-school programs. And so these students continue to receive the support that they need. And of course, the fantastic teachers who are in the classroom every day doing what they, doing the best, what's in the best interest of those kids. So, it's not to say that if this gap isn't closed during the summer, well, it's just going to keep getting wide. I think that's something to consider as well. We have a lot of good intervention capacity in our middle schools now. But again, it's a concept, it's a conceptual proposal. Certainly open to feedback, and definitely something that's not written in stone. We're always evaluating our programs to determine if they need to be adjusted. And that adjustment could be exactly like Mr. Lenegro was saying, which is, we need to go back to exactly the way it was, even if it is going to cost us $45,000. That is a possibility moving forward. But until we actually try, also one final point, folks, is that we're starting to get a lot of requests. The push is starting to come from parents, and started to come last year, where they were like, can we do this online? More and more of our high school students are using EduSeer or using Apex. And we started to get that request from a lot of parents was, is there a virtual distance learning option where students can do it from home and what have you? So, and a lot of districts are doing that. So, just some thoughts to consider, but certainly, Mr. Lonegro, I do appreciate your perspective.
Have we ever looked into where we could charge and even take from out of district as they do in the grade 9 center, rather than getting rid of that program? Maybe even making money on it by taking out of district students?
For the middle school?
Yes.
It's not something we've explored.
It's usually, again, I think a lot of problems we've had when, and I've never been approached by the districts because they usually take care of their own, or because it comes down to a transportation issue that seems much more difficult for 6th and 7th and 8th graders than for high school students. I'm not sure why. Because we don't provide transportation,
No.
does the county provide transportation for students coming here from Saraville?
Newark. I had a kid taking an Uber from Newark every day.
So, but again, thank you. Ms. Powell, do you have a question?
No, I just wanted to make sure that I understood that, basically, so the kids that weren't motivated enough or understood it enough to get the subject in school with the teachers and support, our great support, they're gonna be motivated enough to get it on their own when their parents work and they're left at home with a computer. I just wanted to, like, was that really it? Cause that
That is the whole concept of credit recovery. And we have 100 seats that are full right now within the district. There's a waiting list to get on. And I had a meeting today with a parent, and their child is taking 4 courses just this year alone because they didn't master the courses in previous years. So
it just, I don't know, because I'm summer school, from teaching summer school, that one-on-one with the student, and the office hours are great. However, you know, I don't know, just doesn't sound like they're gonna get they're gonna get the bare minimum through a computer, if they get that at all. So I just wanted to make sure I understood that that's how it was gonna work.
any questions? Yes. I have nothing else this time.
Next month.
Mr. Solkat, with the technology. Mr. Solakowski, when is the next meeting?
It's scheduled for 25th or 28th, Wednesday, right?
Is the 27th, Wednesday the 27th.
March 27th?
Yes.
Okay, moving on to hearing of residents. This will be limited to to comments on items listed for action tonight only, this portion of the meeting. Everything else will be at the end of the meeting. So does anybody have anything?
Can we ask questions about what's been, information that's been presented thus far in the meeting? So I'm reading from the New Jersey Department of Education Office of School Finance. They said that Aldridge Township in the current school year received a little more than $44 million in state aid, and that next year we're getting a little more than $42 million in state aid, and that it's a $1,961,039 reduction. That is different from what was said earlier. Can you explain the difference between those?
If you recall that last year, the budget was passed at $44,500,000, and then the state came in and reduced the taxed the state aid by $1,056,056. We were forced to fund that with unrestricted fund balance this year. So you have to add that 1,056 to the 1,009,000, get to $3 million.
So you're taking the amount that was cut last year and the amount that was cut this year and adding it together, and that's how you're getting
I'm
it?
taking the amount of state aid we're getting this year versus the amount of state aid we're getting next year, and it's $3 million less.
That's just not what the state says. Okay. Anyone else has questions?
On batch 1 of the bill list, we're paying a company Advocate. There's 2 bills. Can you elaborate on what we're paying them for?
Advocate,
Advocate.
those are, we're paying to do inspections on all our facilities, our custodians, and we're also paying for inspections on our food service operation.
I just keep on hearing everything about what we're taking away from the kids, that we're taking paras, we're taking this and that. I just want to understand, and I want to know what about staff? Is anybody looking at staff? I'm not hearing anything about it.
That wasn't something that we're,
Okay,
but I'll answer.
Okay.
We have, and because everyone has their employment rights, we're not mentioning staff or staff cut positions at this meeting,
okay,
but the board is aware of in areas which we will be having staffing cuts. And I've kind of said in public meetings, everything from not only staffing, everything from paper to administrative staff across the district. So everything there and in between. But the employees have a May 15th deadline to be notified. There are notification procedures that have to be done, so we tend not to do them in a public meeting.
Anybody else on action items on this agenda? Okay, thank you. Will be nothing under policy. Curriculum and professional development. Anything anybody want to discuss? Athletics. Okay, under finance, I need a motion for item 2. I'm sorry, 1 and 2. Right. Second? Roll call. Oh, I'm sorry, any discussion? Roll call.
Carol?
Yes.
Freeman? Ellis Walker?
Yes.
Glenn?
yes.
Reed?
Yes.
Solakowski?
Yes.
Callie?
Yes.
Resolution passes.
Any discussion on the remaining items under finance? Non-certificated personnel office. I'm sorry? Yes. Nothing under non-certificated personnel operational and non-certificated personnel other. I need a motion for 1, 2, 1 and 2. Can I have a motion, please? Glenn? I'm sorry. Tara? Lisa? Any discussion? Okay, roll call, please.
Ellis Walker?
Yes.
Glenn?
Yes.
Reed?
Yes.
Solakowski?
Yes.
Carol?
Yes.
Freeman? Callie?
Yes.
It's okay because she answered
Yes, no. You're going down the list and I'm looking at first names, my apologies. Next time we have to have somebody make an address or something. Okay, is there any discussion or question on any of the other items? Okay, moving on to certificated personnel. Motion for item number 1. Oh, and number 2 on the agenda.
I'll move it.
Lentil second.
Any discussion?
Ellis Foster,
Yes.
Lent,
Yes.
Reed,
Yes.
Solikowski,
Yes.
Carol,
Yes.
Prima, Tally.
Yes.
Resolution 22 passed.
Quite a few retirements.
Yes. This part of the retirement is going to be open for everybody to speak with it. I'm sure people would want to acknowledge.
I think I should write it. Yeah.
All right, so nothing else on what's left through item 15. Non-certificated personnel transportation is nothing. Supplies, equipment, and services. Any discussion? Transportation. Anybody? Miscellaneous. Just take a look at the committee attendance and if there's any corrections, let us know. Somebody say something? Right, at all. We'll put you down for half.
Just put Kelly.
Okay, board secretary and board agent. Okay. So now we're at hearing of the residents on any school-related item.
I'm sorry, I had a quick question, if I didn't want to ask it before, I wasn't sure. For Article 20, non-certificated personnel office, Shannon Barry resigned, and we also just had Liz retire. We're down to secretaries. Have there been replacements for either one of them? Because I know last month, I believe on the agenda was one and it wasn't voted upon to replace Liz. I'm just, our office right now is, it's up in the air, or Lori. Is there a
Shannon's not gone yet.
I'm sorry?
Shannon's not gone yet.
I know.
We just found out about her.
I know. Even with that, I was just wondering if there is one, or do we have something on the horizon?
We do have something up here.
Okay. Are hearing residents' opinion on any district-related item?
Oh, it does.
Got it?
That's good. Your sister.
So just to always keep thinking and going forward with the focus on our children in special education, it's my focus, and I'm just going to continue to impress upon how important it is that we do whatever needs to be done to make sure that those children and their futures are not compromised in any way by some tough decisions that need to be made. I've been researching and reading these numbers. I have a stiff neck from all this research. Like my neck, I can't move my neck just from the stress of all of this. I'm reading everything and looking at the numbers. And from what I can tell, the only money that can't be touched for our special education children is the IDEA funding, which is over $2 million that our district receives. But that $5.5 million in state aid, that's folded in to the $44 million that our district receives in state aid. And that is subject to, could be used for anything. It doesn't have to be used specifically for our children. So obviously, I'm always going to be thinking of what's in the best interest of my son and all of the 1,564 classified children in this district. So that's all. I'm just a parent of a nonverbal 8-year-old son, and I don't want to see his aid or the care compromised in any way.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Sorry. Along those lines, I wasn't planning, but it's the story I told earlier. We had one of our special ed teachers out yesterday. What's the acronym for that class yesterday?
LLD.
An LLD class, limited language disability? Learning, I'm sorry, limited learning, and I went to cover it for the main teacher, and I walked in a couple minutes early to try and get set because it wasn't my class, and Miss Ench was there and Miss Stetson, and as the students came to the class, I was just, it gets you right here, they were like, Miss Donnelly's not here. They were so, I mean, this was Miss Ench, one of the paras, and she of course handles it great. No, don't worry about it. I literally had to show the kids a picture of Miss Donnelly, say, no, don't worry, everything's fine, so that I could get them calmed down enough with the paras, of course, who did all the work in that class. And I was just shocked. I think there were maybe 5 or 6 kids at most with 2 paras that I couldn't believe that. I mean, this is not an exaggeration. These kids, when it was there, someone wasn't there, there was nothing that was going to be going on. If it's not these paras, and they're amazing. I mean, it's just unbelievable. I could hold 29 kids in a class and juggle them all day. Doing that all day is just shocking. And I really I urge other people to find out what it's about, be a part of it. It's remarkable when you're actually in the middle of it. It really is. They're amazing. And the little teeny change, you guys have said, little teeny changes. When they walk in that classroom, if someone different is there, forget it. There's no learning. God knows what's going to happen. I mean, they handle everything. They really do. It's just, it's hard to put a price tag on it. I know we're all trying to save money, but my God, what they do is amazing.
Thank you.
Talk to yourselves.
We'll stand first, right?
Anybody else? Any old business? New business?
I'd just like to remind everybody, this Saturday is the Future Chefs Competition. If you haven't heard of it, it's 5th grade students, usually representing every school, have a healthy meal preparation competition, for lack of a better term. It's open to the public. Come on down, support the children, get to taste all their little goodies that they make, and fun time. 11 o'clock Saturday in high school cafeteria. This has been going on for a few, it started out as like a little cute snack. Now it's turned into like a meal.
Right, well, they've done, like, they had to prepare something that they would eat for lunch, a healthy lunch, and it had specific criteria. They've done, variety.
We made a wrap. Didn't we have a wrap?
Wrap music or wrap food?
Wrap food. They 1 year was wraps. They had to make a wrap.
Well, I had one of them that they made was a sushi sandwich, it was not fish. But they took the bread and they rolled it out thin, like, and then they put whatever they were putting in the sandwich, rolled it up like a sushi roll and cut it. And I still, my kids eat that for lunch.
It's a good time, so if you're not doing anything Saturday morning, please come on down.
And if you're up even earlier on Saturday morning, the Old Bridge Education Foundation is doing a fundraiser at Friendly's from 9 to 11. You'll notice on this agenda that we recently notified 6 staff members on their mini grants. We were pleased to be able to give 6 mini grants. So come out for some pancakes. Friendly's, support John Cracky over there as well and his establishment, and we'd love to see you there for the OBE fundraiser. There you go. You'd be a day morning and evening.
Don't eat too much of breakfast.
That's on you. Dinner's at Lisa's house. Okay. I believe I need a motion to go into Executive session.
You need a motion to go into executive session for personnel, for 2 disciplinary matters, personnel issues with the NP 28 budget.
Today? Yes. Oh my God. Earlier today, I had this. We slept for an hour today.